Mary never did go on her walk. A full hour had elapsed when the two decided to retire to their coffins. The entire castle was now stark silent, with the exception of those in her dungeon, human food supply, and political hostages, some groaning in agony and slow death. One such hostage was the Duchess of Vienna, Amelia Habsburg, whom Carmilla had Mariana captured prior to her own death. The reason for her detainment was because of her secret alliance to the Turkish king, which led to an invasion and overthrow of a neighboring principality. Prior to this, Carmilla was residing at her chateau in Moravia and had seen a rise in refugees of a varied diversity, which, as a result of the continuous influx, reduced the city to crime and barbarism. The Duchess sanctioned the inclusion of their religion and allotted taxes to build housing facilities and sought employment for such persons. The citizens decried these policies and started to revolt. Violent bloodshed ensued. Yet, due to the Duchess' pride and aversion to the church, she refused the Austrian military and the Holy Knights of the Roman Empire to deal with the situation. Reportedly, she had a fervor of uniting the world and dissolving Christianity. She embraced Mohammedanism and erected a mosque to her constituents. Her constituents assumed she simply went mad from fanaticism. It's also known that the Duchess was a serial killer who prided herself in bathing in the blood of her victims, from whence she stated that the blood rejuvenated her. Once Carmilla observed the practices and methods of Lady Amelia Habsburg, she decided to kidnap her and replace her with a double. Initially, Mariana was to be the proxy for this arrangement. Carmilla also requested aid from the Holy Church with Mariana's help, stating the horrors of the Turk invaders and other foreign influence in Vienna and Moravia, and within 2 months there was a great culling. The main reason, according to Carmilla, was that perpetual bloodshed interfered with the human stockpile. If humans are at peace, a vampire can feed without interruption. And since her capture, Carmilla had been feeding off her slowly and methodically. She intended on keeping her alive until death. Her reason for this was because Amelia's act of bathing in blood angered her as a misuse of human vitality, and she criticized her on wasting blood. Granted, she could have killed her, but decided on torturing her with a lifelong wearisome wasting away. Her cell was large and comfortable, with all the furnishing and trinkets befitting royalty, with the exception of the iron bars themselves. Guards were stationed to make sure she didn't commit suicide. Ever since the death of Mariana, Carmilla made sure to mark her vehemently. Just remember, Lady Amelia, your treasonous actions place you in your current unfortunate situation, and once again to remind you, you're the real monster. When I was a human, I did none of the things you did, and also your blood lacks savor. Carmilla awoke half a day later than she anticipated. She took a hot bath in aromatic herbs and healing salts and performed her libation to the Egyptian goddess Sekhmet, who was the creator of all vampires. Afterwards, she took to meditating in a room full of various rare crystals, and as she was meditating, a noticeable electric current was surging around her, and the air hissed and popped. This room was dimly lit and served the purpose of harnessing and fortifying her dragon-like strength, heightened proprioception, visualization, as well, and most importantly, procuring density to her ethereal body in the advent of creating a spiritual body that can operate separately but in tangent to her corporeal body. This was a crucial technique for enduring daylight, having the ability to mingle in with humans. As it is, the sun causes a vampire to be in a heavy, lethargic, though non-lethal state of stasis. However, a vampire is entirely vulnerable in this state, but a high spiritual resonance enables a vampire to some extent be immune to daylight, and this is also a detriment in vampiric strength, the length of time exposed to the sun before reaching stasis. Only one vampire had been able to endure a whole day of sunlight, and that was her former master, slain by her own hands, Count Charlemagne Barbarov. Ah, Carmilla, there you are. Mary was the first to approach, via a telepathic subtle demand on Carmilla's part. They crossed paths in one of the southern corridors. Every window were heavily draped. Only the candles remained lit. Ma, you nearly slept all day. I dare say you're aging, Carmilla, my dear older sister. Did you have a pleasant dream at least? Mary smiled jestingly. She was clad in warrior's armor of medium build, wearing an ornamented steel helmet adorned with phoenix plumes. In her right hand was a beautiful and lethal katana. Weren't we just talking a few hours ago? That is some impressive regalia you're sporting. I take it you were sparring with Lisette? We haven't started yet. None of us have eaten either. The other two are in the garden, somewhere in the shade. You know them, always at it, those two. Well, shall we dine, my starving Minerva? Carmilla returned the humor. Mary's large, innocent-like eyes locked onto Carmilla's. I see you are brimming with new powers. You ought to let me use your meditation chamber while I'm here. Carmilla smiled asymmetrically. Of course. The two were walking towards the dining hall, and this small walk in itself endowed them with the luxury of seeing some of Carmilla's fine paintings, some of relatives, of creatures, of landscape, paintings of Christ even. In fact, the contents of Carmilla's castle, its history, and the acquisition of many rare artifacts are in themselves another story. The castle was fairly large, too fitting for a countess. It was more like a museum than a habitation. It was a cinematic walk. I'm not actually hungry. I've only come to join you. Well, I'm not hungry either. Let's find Lisette and Clarissa. This garden, as I must elaborate, was situated in an underground crypt and resembled a subterranean paradise, a veritable oasis away from the sun. However, on this day it was absolutely gloomy and gray. Lisette was in heavy armor made of Romanian dragon scales. She bore two nodachis. One was for Mary. A faint azure light came from the entrance, providing the only light, otherwise it was near dark. However, to a vampire, it was as visible as day, with a minor ocular adaptation. Why are you smiling, Mary? This may prove tough here. And she approached, giving her the sword. I figure I'd use my platinum sword instead, Mary replied, semi-dolefully examining the craftsmanship and details of the Nadachi. This is indeed an awful weapon, and I absolutely love it. Can I keep it? Is it a gift? Please say that it is. How many weapons did you bring, Lisette? Do you also have a sword hidden in your hair? Both Carmilla and Mary laughed. Lisette grinned. I can use my hair as a whip. You see this braid with this iron ball at the tip? Well, that ladies can take an eye out. Well, I know you're dangerous, but don't forget, I have to make it back to Florence. Carmilla sat atop a large rock and pulling her left knee towards her breast, perched up as an observer. The winner gets to take home the Duchess of Moravia as a prize. That's not a prize, Carmilla. That's not a prize, Carmilla, whose blood honestly is kind of bland. Forgive me. I know you took the pleasure of turning her blood into wine, Mary replied. From above, Clarissa entered with two chained men in the most distressing conditions, rudely injured and in tatters. First, I want you to perform a test cut on these two remarkable and distinguished dignitaries. This should indicate my approach in your training, Lisette said. The men were blindfolded and had been previously tortured for a span of 2 years. They shivered quietly. They knew it was their last hour. Don't hesitate, Mary. These men assaulted my kinsman, Sigismus. I'm quite fair in my methods. Mary looked towards the prisoners. In less than a blink of a second, a spray of blood so violent erupted from the man nearest her. Yet Mary's weapon was sheathed. Mary had merely drawn her sword and with one fluid motion swung her sword upwards, slicing him from bottom up, and brung the sword down, heavy with the same force, twisting the hilt to expose the blade in this descending slash. The man was 30 feet away. The second man fainted. My, this is a dangerous blade. I'm keeping it. The double slash that Mary delivered was so fast that centrifugal force alone had removed any blood stains from the blade, and it was warm to the touch. The man was cleaved in two. It was a grisly sight to behold. One of his eyes was visible behind the blindfold. It was utterly appalling. Looks like he fainted, Carmilla laughed. Delightful, Carmilla added. A dead burglar. I wouldn't have cared one iota if they robbed anyone other than my kinfolk. That is reprehensible. It seems that you have more problems than one. Though you are too nice, these men should have been dead a long time ago. Barney is running amok. I'll deal with him tonight, stated Lisette, unsheathing her sword and planting herself in a combat stance. Mary, this is merely training. I can't lose you like we lost Mariana. If Touchstone is stronger than her, then you have to train harder. And I'll be easy on you. You'll make it back to your plush Firenze. We're not sparring? Mary asked in false despondence, placing her left hand on her hip. Of course not. I've been in 4 wars and 500 battles. You still sleep on soft beds like a human with pillows stuffed with geese down. Clarissa sat next to Carmilla, chuckling. She then whispered something in her ear. The details are unimportant. She merely told her how fearsome Lisette looked in her dragon armor. She was, after all, the commander of the Order of the Dragon. I like beds. Coffins are a bit claustrophobic. Besides, Mary said. Ready yourself, Lisette interrupted. The same slash you gave that thing? Repeat, and I'll merely block. Do this as many times as you need. I'll even throw in some incremental open areas for you to exploit. Simply strike any part of my armor and we'll move on. The spectators on the rock became hyper-focused. The tips of Clarissa's fangs nearly dripped saliva. A cool, fragrant breeze swept throughout the cavern. The man sprawled out on the ground, gasped, and stirred. Mary then violently crashed the platinum sabatons into his skull with such a heavy force that a fissure formed underneath the man's upper torso, and there was an echo of the earth cracking. Mary sprinted forward, almost disappearing. She lashed out a barrage of multi-directional strikes, averaging roughly 4 strikes per second. In return, Lisette taking her serious block using both hands instead of one like she initially intended to do. It was rather the thought that Mary's weakness could result in her death, and as aforementioned, Mary lived more viciously than them all. Carmilla lived somberly. Clarissa lived sporadically. Lisette lived for war. Without a shadow of a doubt, Lisette felt she could utterly vanquish Touchstone. She wasn't worried about Carmilla at all. She was in fact the strongest of them all, possessing the very powers of a fallen angel. "You're moving way too slow, Mary. I'm counting your strikes and thinking of other things simultaneously." Mary didn't let up, and her speed nearly doubled. 10 strikes per second. It was like a tempest. A few sparks emitted from these clashing blades. Mary utilized all her knowledge of sidestepping. Lisette had yet to move for position, but merely rotated her body, seemingly adapting to this onslaught, almost second-naturally. Clarissa whispered again in Carmilla's right ear. The latter gawked and laughed. The laughter couldn't be heard. It sounded like a machine destroying something. This training session was in fact the product of the original war on Earth between gods, demigods, angels, demons, and every cursed and vengeful spirit. All 4 of these women were hundreds of years ago human themselves, products of vampire lords of old possessing outrageous strength. However, Carmilla was the only one present who was changed by an actual fallen angel, the perfect human dragon. Charlemagne